So welcome to our panel discussion on why food matters. So today we have with us Sam, who is the second generation owner of Bi-Rite Market and the founder of the Bi-Rite family of businesses, which includes the two San Francisco markets, Bi-Rite Creamery, Bi-Rite Catering, and Bi-Rite Farms. Sam is also co-founded and is on the board of 18 Reasons. And then we have Sarah, who is the executive director of 18 Reasons. She's worked on food-related projects in the Bay Area since 2008. She launched the Bay Area's first Market Match, which gives farmers market customers who use food stamps extra funds to spend at the market, and a Veggie RX program that helps diabetes patients increase their produce consumption while measuring positive health outcomes. In 2011, she founded the nonprofit 3 Squares, which merged with 18 Reasons in 2013. And I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about their backgrounds in a second. But first, I would just want to say, please stick around after the panel to continue the conversation, and there will be ice cream. So I'm sure that had nothing to do with why so many of you are here today. But with that, let's welcome our panel to Google. Cool. So I'd love to start with your personal stories. I don't know if one of you wants to go first.
I'm going first.
Okay.
So, hi, I'm Sarah. And yeah, I've been working in nonprofits for a long time. I originally started out working in the arts. And when I moved to San Francisco 8 years ago, I found a job working in food. And it had never really occurred to me to work in food. Food was just something that I loved and did and ate every day, 3 times. But it turns out there's a whole wonderful world of people working in food and a lot of great things to do in the field. So I started working for farmers markets, as Jess said. And I think people think that farmers markets are just a bunch of farmers who all agreed to show up at a certain place on a certain time. And that's kind of the illusion that we want you to have. But in fact, farmers markets are organized by nonprofits. The one I worked for runs 60 farmers markets all over the Bay Area. So they are organized and marketed, and permits are managed and so forth by nonprofits. So I was running nutrition education programs, writing grants, which was how I started out in nonprofits, was raising money. And then left the farmers markets to start my own nonprofit based around cooking. We were doing cooking demos in markets, and I felt that hands-on cooking experience is so much more valuable than watching people cook. Whether it's live or on TV, we were talking about this at lunch that people spend 7 hours a week watching cooking shows on TV and 30 minutes a week actually cooking. So clearly watching people cook is not really getting them to cook. So I started a nonprofit to teach free cooking classes to low-income adults and kids all over the Bay Area. And through that met Sam. We asked him to come and speak at one of our fundraisers and got involved that way. We started a film festival together as a fundraiser. And when the time was right, 18 Reasons was kind of looking to go in the direction of doing more free programming. We were looking to raise more money and thought that paid classes might be a way to raise money, and it all kind of worked out perfectly that we merged the organizations together into 18 Reasons as it is today, which is a nonprofit offering both paid classes and events in our classroom on 18th Street in the Mission, as well as our free Cooking Matters program out in the community.
I was going to say, it's just a pretty cool, unique model because we've got a combination of earned income because of the paid classes and contributed income that we get through either donations or through grant writing. And I think a really important model for the future sustainability of nonprofits going forward. I mean, there's got to be a combination of both, I think. So I'm Sam Mogannam. As Jess said, I'm the second generation owner of Bi-Rite. I grew up in it and wanted nothing to do, nothing but to get out of it. My whole youth, I literally spent the years from 6 until I was 17 working at my father's store. My father and uncle bought the business in 1964, so well over 50 years ago. And the market itself has been on 18th Street since 1940, so over 75 years now. And I think many of you have seen, have been in San Francisco long enough, have seen how rapidly the city, especially its heritage businesses, have changed, and it's something that I'm very proud of, the fact that this single-story, building with the original facade has lasted as long as it has. So after school, I would go and I would like sweep the floors, and then I learned how to stock the shelves and ring on the register. Eventually, I was buying wine when I was 15. I had no idea what it tasted like, but I was making these beautiful displays. And at one point, the Bi-Rite was selling more Behringer White Zinfandel than any other grocery store in San Francisco. and all the gallows sales reps came down and descended on it. You know, like they had the regional sales director come in. It's like, who's the wine buyer here? And my dad was like, introduced me to them, and they're like, going, what? They were offering me jobs, like saying, well, when you graduate from high school, we want to put you into our management development program. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But when I graduated from high school, I thought I was going to become a hotel guy, and my intent was to eventually get to Cornell and started off here at City College of San Francisco. And tried to get a job in a hotel and couldn't. Nobody would give me a job because I didn't have any experience. I think all of us have been there. And it forced me to kind of seek work in hospitality outside of hotels. And so I started applying in restaurants and got a lot of the same answer: no experience, no job. Finally, I had a young chef who took a chance on me and hired me to be a prep cook. And I fell in love, and within 3 months of cooking at this diner, I was the head cook, and like in an open kitchen, like getting a chance to like watch people eat the food that I was cooking, and then they would come up and say thank you and tell me how great it was, and I immediately like realized that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I was 18, and I feel like super lucky that I discovered what I wanted to do from the rest of my life so early on. And spent the next dozen or so years cooking in various restaurants, 7 of which I had my own restaurant down in the financial district, not too far from here, over on Bush and Kearny, close to the Chinatown gates. I opened that business when I was 23. Then a few years later, opened up in 1994 San Francisco's first organic coffee and juice bar. It was so far ahead of its time that it didn't succeed. We literally struggled. I mean, back then, a 50-pound box of carrots was anywhere between $70 and $90 a box, and now it's about $25 to $30 a case. And so you can imagine the economics. And back then, people were not paying $8 to $10 for fresh pressed juice. They were only willing to pay about $3. And so you can do the math and begin to understand the struggles. And then Jamba Juice opened up right across the street from us, and that pretty much was the kiss of death. And so my brother and I, with our heads between our legs, kind of like sold it and walked away from it. And it was sad, but it was an important failure because it taught me that I had to learn how to meet people on their own terms, right, and meet them in some sort of middle ground for them to feel comfortable with what we were offering them, and not offer something that was so polarizing, right? That was such a niche market. And so when we opened Bi-Rite in 1998. We took that that philosophy, that mentality, and also this mentality and philosophy of a cook, someone who feeds people, and applied it to a grocery store. And when we first opened, not all our produce was organic. I'd say about half, 40% might have been organic. Of that, maybe a quarter of it was farm direct. We had conventional bananas and other conventional fruit and vegetables because price sensitivity was really was a major issue, and we wanted to make sure that people felt like they could access the food that we were selling. And slowly, through education, right? I consider myself a feeder, but I also consider myself a teacher. Through this process, we evolved, and as a business we evolved, and as a neighborhood and as a community we evolved, and we've grown together. And we started with a staff of 6, and now we've got about 315 people working for us in the company, and have a tremendous reach and influence around the country with how we operate and how we view business. It's been a cool, super cool, fun ride.
How many? I just want to ask the audience a few questions first. How many of you identify as home cooks? Cool. And then how many of you are familiar with Bi-Rite?
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
I meant to ask that.
And how many of you have taken a cooking class, maybe not necessarily at 18 Reasons, but anywhere else? And that includes knife skills or anything like that. Okay, so that's a lot. So this is a good
The
room.
choir's here.
How many of you brought your lunch to work today?
So I want to pick up on something that you said, and this will be a question for both of you. You said the philosophy of a cook is what you apply to Bi-Rite. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your ultimate mission behind Bi-Rite and what that means, the philosophy of a cook, and then similarly how that sort of extends to the work that you do at 18 Reasons and what's really driving that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they dovetail pretty seamlessly. I don't know. I was probably in my early 20s when I came to the realization that as a cook, I had this extraordinary responsibility to the person that I was feeding. I got to select the ingredients, prep them, wash them, cut them, and then cook them and season them and taste them through this process and watch them evolve. And then put them on a plate and try to make it as pretty and beautiful as I possibly could, and then hand that plate to somebody, and then watch them to actually take it and put it in their body, right? Put it in their mouth, and then they'd experience the beautiful acids and salts and sugars and bitters and whatever other flavors were going on in this dish. Which was transformative, right? I mean, all of us have had these like really magical experiences when we eat something that's super profound and delicious. It puts us in a different place, right? It makes us either feel really great or it makes us feel shitty, depending on who it is that's feeding us. And I definitely wanted to make people feel great. I didn't want to make them feel sick, and so I took that same kind of like sense of mission, that belief that it all starts with great ingredients, knowing where those ingredients come from, making sure that they're grown well, knowing where they're being grown, who grew them, and kind of like apply that to almost everything that we sell in the grocery store. As a cook, I was yearning for a place to go shop in San Francisco that had all the ingredients that I was accustomed to using as a chef. And back in '98, that really didn't exist. There weren't very many stores where you can go and have a selection of a dozen vinegars. You'd be able to go and get Star red wine vinegar, Star white wine vinegar, and Monari balsamic vinegar, and that was pretty much those were the three vinegars that every supermarket had. But to find vinegar from the southwest of France made from the Banyuls grape, or to find sherry wine vinegar, or to find beautiful single varietal grape-based vinegars just didn't happen. And these are magical ingredients that really can transform a dish. And so we wanted to have the ingredients, but we also wanted to have the acumen, because it's one thing to sell those ingredients, but you have to be able to teach people how to use them. And so, we surrounded ourselves with a staff of folks that love to cook and worked in restaurants, and if they weren't cooks, they were servers who had spent time working with chefs that taught them a lot about food. And so we were teaching people how to use the ingredients at the same time. We were empowering people and helping them, elevate the food that they were serving, feeding themselves and feeding their families. To me, cooking is one of those like foundational, basic skills that each of us needs to embrace and to celebrate, because it not only ensures that you're able to feed yourself really well, but it creates this opportunity to share. Right, and it's so wonderful to be able to feed somebody, and then to get that immediate reward from it. But it's also really wonderful to sit around the table and to break bread, right, and to talk, and that's how relationships get built. And our mission at Bi-Rite is creating community through food, and it's about building relationships, right, deep, meaningful relationships. And I feel really strongly that if we're able to, as a society, make stronger bonds, be more intimately connected, then we will achieve change and become a stronger community together, and really be supportive and helpful to each other. And 18 Reasons, just steps right in there and actually, it takes what we're able to do on a very transactional basis, I would say, because our interactions in the market can be anywhere between 2 and 10 minutes, depending. And with the classes that we offer at 18 Reasons, and Sarah will talk more about their impact, that we're able to take control of or ownership of that experience for a period of like 2 to 3 hours, which really lets us go much deeper.
Yeah, we teach basic knife skills about twice a month, and it's the fastest class to sell out. It's the most in-demand class, and our chef said to me recently, I can't believe there's anyone in San Francisco who hasn't taken our basic knife skills class at this point. And people will come up to her at the farmer's market and tell her things they remember from the basic knife skills class. And it always amazes me too that this very simple skill is lacking in people's lives. And to me, cooking is one tool of self-empowerment and kind of taking control over your own life and doing things for yourself. And knowing how to use a knife, it's not that hard. Like, we do a lot of things that are harder, like play Pokemon Go. Like, I don't have a clue how to do that. But using a knife, like, people come into our knife skills class and they're so scared and they're so nervous, and just watching them pick up the knife for the first time, and they're just so worried about it. And by the end of the class, like, they're just relaxed, they're so happy, they've mastered the skill, and that's all you really need to go and cook anything that you want for yourself. And so even in our paid classes or in our free classes, where we get a lot of folks who don't cook, they've never cooked before, they've never used some of the vegetables that we're using, they're intimidated by trying new things, trying new skills. By the end of that class, they're so happy they've mastered this wonderful new skill. And I think cooking, along with a lot of other home ec skills, have been completely lost, right? How many people are still, sewing their own buttons on, and fixing their cars and building things in their wood shops in their garage, and things that used to be taught in school that are not taught in school anymore, because the corporations that control us don't want us to know how to do things for ourselves, right? No, seriously. Like, who used their body to get to work today? Like, who walked or rode a bike? Good job. Like, you did something for yourself. Like, you took that power and you did it yourself. Who cleans their own house? Awesome. You guys are awesome. You take care of your own shit. That's great. I love it. Like, we're just encouraged all the time by corporations trying to make money that we shouldn't do any of these things for ourselves, right? We shouldn't, we should take an Uber. Like, why would you walk? Why would you ride your bike? Like, it's so easy. You shouldn't, clean your own clothes, or, do your own laundry, or clean your own house. Like, you shouldn't cook your own food. Why would you want to cook your own food? Like, there's all this, just great food out there. Just eat what we give you, And a lot of it, yes, like, things have made our lives easier. Have you guys read Michael Pollan's Cooked, his last book? He points out that, when all these labor-saving devices were coming around in the 50s, cooking was the one chore that housewives said they actually enjoyed, and they didn't want to be taken away from them. And the reason that you still have to add an egg to a cake mix is because that gives you the illusion that you're cooking, right? They could have powdered the egg and thrown it in there, but people wouldn't go for that. People still want to cook in some way. And so you add that egg in, you feel like you're actually making that cake yourself, right? And so I feel like people do really want to use their brains and their bodies to take care of themselves, but it's getting harder and harder. We're encouraged not to do it. And cooking for yourself really brings that sense of empowerment. And then also, as Sam was touching on, connection to the people who made that food, and to your family as well. I'm serious about bringing your own lunch. Like, I bring my own lunch to work every day, and it's usually leftovers of what me and my boyfriend made last night. And for me, it's like a point in the day when I think about my boyfriend and the dinner we had last night and my connection with him. And sometimes we text each other, like, thanks for the great lunch, like whichever one of us cooked it. And it gives me that connection. Like, I know exactly what that food means, and it's our food, even if it's not as good as like the amazing lunch I just had in your cafe. Like, we made risotto last night, and I had some risotto, and I had a raw pepper, so I cut it up, and I had this lunch that was like risotto and a raw pepper. Like, who cares? But it was a risotto that we made together, and peppers are good for you, so whatever. And it just makes me think about, my family and my home, and it makes me happy to do that and have that connection. And the food that's here is like, it's amazing and wonderful and futuristic. Like my best friend is the food director for Sprig, and she came to dinner at my house, and we ordered Sprig, and it arrived, and this food was in front of us, just like the food you guys have here, very healthy, local, seasonal, and I'm like, this is weird, I'm in the future, food just showed up, and it's delicious and healthy, but who, where, what is this? Like, what connection is there? Who grew this food? Who made this food? Like, I had nothing to do with this food. And, having that experience of cooking it yourself, cooking with your friends and family, even if it's not that great, like just make a grilled cheese sandwich, and, you can feel really proud of yourself for doing that and feel a moment of humanity that, the man is trying to take away from us all the time. Seriously, I'm kind of an anarchist.
Really?
Just a little bit. And it's, I do think it's wonderful that Google provides you such good food, because I think a lot of young people are working in the tech industry, and I've seen it, like people who are my age and starting to have kids and not eat dinner at work every day. They're taking that food they're used to. You guys are used to a really high quality food. That's what you're going to cook for your families. So when this like tech generation grows up a little bit and stops being at work 24 hours a day, and I've seen it, like a friend of mine who works at Apple, he used to use his kitchen as storage. He's like, well, it's not worth my time to learn how to cook, because like I make more money working instead of cooking. And now he has a kid, and he's like Instagram every single thing that he makes. Like seriously, same person. And and he's 40. So when this young generation is coming up, I do think that having that wonderful access to great food at work will influence the choices that you guys are making. But I would encourage you to start that process now. And like, come on out to Google. Like, yeah, there's classes here and there's stuff here, but come on out into the city, because you can have different experiences and come meet new people and learn new things, and like discover things you never would have expected.
It's so totally funny, because I was in New York about a week and a half ago, and there's this whole campaign. Has anyone here used Seamless? It's like another meal delivery service that's out there, and the subways were riddled with these ads, and one of them was just so poignant to what you're saying, Sarah. It said, "Avoid cooking like you avoid Times Square." And like anybody who lives in New York will not go to Times Square. It's like the one part of the city that you just avoid. And I couldn't believe that they used that as the analogy for buying Seamless. But they're subliminally telling us that cooking actually is a bad chore, that it's a waste of time.
The ones I hate are TaskRabbit. You see them all over the city. We do chores, you live life. I'm like, what is life? Is like not doing chores? Like, chores are part of life, people. Like, yeah, sometimes you have to, hang shelves, and like, why not get your friends to come over and like hang your shelves with you? Like, it's not all about like drinking in Dolores Park. Like, seriously, like learn to do things yourself. You do chores, you live life. Oh my God. Anyway.
Although, to be fair, I'm sure a lot of people drinking in Dolores Park swing by Bi-Rite first.
Totally.
That is definitely true.
So I wanted to also ask, I think one of the other things, you talked about cooking as self-empowerment, and then sort of the tech generation growing up. The other thing that I've always found is cooking and learning about cooking and learning new kinds of food and learning new kinds of ingredients is sort of intellectually, like it's an extension of my intellectual curiosity. Like I consider it to be fun and interesting and learning the way that it's fun and interesting and to learn about anything else. And so, to the extent that you have either seen people really have those kind of awakenings when they're shopping or when they're in the class, I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of that, and if that's been effective for you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it is. There couldn't be a more perfect balance of science and technology, in that sense that you've got to follow like a recipe, and there's measurements and ingredients. I mean, there's a whole like a scientific aspect to it, but then there's like this really amazing creative like side and this spontaneous side, and then there's like this whole like it's not innate for all of us, but like instinctual side that after you've done it, then you can begin to add your own flair and adapt and really be super like creative and fun with the ingredients that you select and the adaptation that you do with particular recipes. Anytime I've ever cooked with anybody and like gone through the process and handed them with the knife and shown them how to hold the knife and then like had them walk through the sautéing or roasting process, they're stimulating parts of their brain that that they haven't exercised, and those endorphins that come from that process are they're extremely energizing and uplifting, and inevitably I've never actually seen it not bring a smile to somebody's face in this sense of fulfillment that comes from the process of transforming a whole head of cauliflower into a beautiful roasted cauliflower that we ate today for lunch, And that's like part of what worries me about things like Sprig and these other meal kit companies, is that we're gonna eventually get to this place, like, where people aren't even going to know what a whole head of cauliflower looks like. If if you ask, like, there was like this whole thing that was done on kids, and they asked them, to draw what the animal, or where beef comes from, and they drew pictures of steak, right, because they had no idea that steak came from cows, and I've seen it in our own store. We often will have like little groups of kids come in, and one of the first things that I do is take them to the produce counter and just kind of get a sense of whether they know what their veggies are, and I'll point to particular veggies and ask them to just like tell me what they are. I mean, things like cauliflower and broccoli and eggplant, celery. They have no idea what it is. And then when you tell them, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that that's what that was. I'd never heard of that." I mean, these are like 8 to 10-year-olds, and it's kind of scary. And if we continue to just like rely on diced up, pre-cut, pre-washed everything, then that connection to what I feel is like a foundation to who we are as people, and what has like actually been the foundation of what created society. If it wasn't for modern agriculture, we would still be like, running around with spears chasing after animals. I mean, that's really what created the first communities, was the agricultural communities that were created in Mesopotamia. Food's critical for us, and we need it, and we need to be empowered with that knowledge and that information to be able to do it for ourselves.
Amen. Yeah, I think one thing that makes 18 Reasons kind of unique among other cooking schools is that the person teaching our Indian cooking class is from India, and the person teaching our Italian class is from Italy. And they are mostly not trained chefs, unfortunately, for our beloved volunteers who have to wash dishes behind them. Chefs are amazing humans who really know how to get things done in a clean and wonderfully organized way. And home cooks are amazing, but they're super messy. And we have these really passionate home cooks who come to us and say, "Hey, look, I'm from wherever. I'm from Iran, and I really want to do this like traditional, I want to teach a class on like northern Iran, but then I want to do a different class on like western Iran." We're like, "Great, like who knew? Northern and western Iran are so different." And that's like, those are the kind of teachers who come to us. They mostly find us, and then we have these classes where you really delve into a culture and the ingredients and that kind of 360-degree experience of a completely different place, but with that same love for home cooking. And those, a lot of the recipes in our classes you can't get anywhere. If you come to our, Vietnamese class, you won't be making anything you could get at a Vietnamese restaurant. You'll be getting things that are like served on the street in Vietnam, or our Vietnamese teacher is from the island that fish sauce comes from. He's a big fish sauce guy, and we'll teach you like all these different things to do with fish sauce and how it's made and all these things. So our teachers are really, really invested in a deep way in getting people excited about not only the food, but the culture behind it and the incredible richness that in every single country and every single region in every country. Our Italian teacher does 12 classes in a year from 12 different parts of Italy, and they're all completely different, right? There's this amazing diversity that's still out there in the world, even though we're all eating hamburgers and fries here in America every day. There's this wonderful richness of food and culture and ingredients that's out there. Our chef actually has a book coming out today called Dandelion and Quince. It's about 36 unusual fruits, vegetables, and herbs that you may not have heard of and may not be using. And it's all wonderful that we're eating a lot of kale now, but there's a lot more than kale that's out there in the vegetable world, right? Like let's eat celeriac, and let's eat, stinging nettles. Like let's eat all these other weird things that are amazing and delicious and really good for you and have these different health benefits and uses and cultural references from around the world. So it's something that we do that's kind of beyond the skills, is like really giving people that cultural experience and putting them in touch with other home cooks like them from around the world.
I was curious to hear about how Bi-Rite has potentially evolved as San Francisco has evolved. You were referencing earlier that there is so many of these newfangled things, Uber, TaskRabbit, and we're like in this hotbed of a city that's like really on the edge. And I was curious, for a business that has existed for so long, what is that like responding to a place that's changing so rapidly?
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like the change that's happened in the last 2 years has been exponentially faster than the change that we've experienced the last 16 years under my ownership, and we're still trying to understand it. You know, we were talking about this over lunch. Part of the change that's really significant to us is that there's been a shift in who lives in San Francisco, and we spent years cultivating these relationships. I mean, it's what we do. You know, I mean, we sell food, but really it's relationship building that we do. Whether it's with the people that we're selling the food to, or the people we're buying it from, or the staff that we employ, and because of the economic challenges that many people have faced, they've either been displaced and have had to leave the Bay Area, oftentimes leave the state, or they cashed out because it was just like too lucrative that they were like, you know what, I can do better somewhere else. And so now we're trying to get to know a whole new demographic. I feel like we're back in startup mode again, yet in a slightly different way. Where when we started in '98, and going through the crash that happened, the first the dot-com bust that happened, and then the second crash that happened in 2009. We had just a deep-rooted community of people that were loyal. Now we're finding that we're having to actually start all over again with a bunch of other markets and services that are out there that are like taking kind of like what we've done and iterating on it and offering local, organic, sustainable, everything, right?
Sam, could you talk a little bit about the decision and discussion around opening the second location on Divisadero, and whether you are planning further growth? At what point does that make sense?
Yeah, great question. The second market, to be honest, was driven by a need within the organization to create space for people to grow. We were about 12, I think it was like 13 years in. When we actually embarked on the search for a new spot to do a market, and at the time we had several staff members who had been with us for a long time, and they wanted to grow like all of us, right? I mean, we just need that. We need to constantly be challenged and to feel like that we're taking the experiences that we're building and building on them and doing more and better things. And there was definitely a few key people that if we didn't open the second market, we probably would have lost. And so we started the process, and we knew that we wanted to be in a neighborhood where there were like-minded people were going to be there. And Nopa, the restaurant, is owned by two dear friends. Lawrence, who's the chef, and I have known each other since the days when I had my restaurant. So back in 1993 we met. And then Jeff Hannick, who's his partner, and I went to high school together. So I've known him since I was 14. We're both native San Franciscans, and so that was a logical spot for us to move into. And that building had heritage. It was an original Safeway back in the late 20s. Back when the supermarkets didn't have to be 50,000 square feet with 4-acre parking lots, and take up all this space. I mean, every neighborhood had its Bi-Rite or its mini little Safeway, and people would like walk. They would use their bodies, and they would shop and see each other in the grocery store, get to know their butcher, Sam, and then walk and carry their own groceries home, and then cook. And so it was a neighborhood that also had been asking for us. There were several neighborhoods that wanted us to move, and that was one. And then, with regards to future growth, while we were in the process of building out the Divisadero store, about a year, half, 8, 10 months in, conversations internally started to happen around who were going to move over there, trying to start to build the outline of a team, the leadership team. And I had several staff members asking me about whether there was an opportunity for them to move over there, and even more staff members asking me what the future of Bi-Rite looked like. They wanted to know if we were going to be the next Whole Foods, or if we were going to continue to expand in San Francisco, or if we were looking at out of the Bay Area. And I didn't have an answer that was totally codified. And that wasn't one that all of us shared. And so we started, embarked on the process of writing a 10-year vision. And it took us a year and a half. It usually takes, it takes us a long time to write our missions and our visions, because we really want to, have space in between particular sessions, so there's opportunity for reflection. And we also are very Socratic and try to involve as many people as we possibly can. And the vision writing process actually involved all 250 people who were working in the organization. And we. At each point when we had the drafts, we were delivering the drafts in both English and in Spanish to make sure that all the populations in our company really kind of had the opportunity to contribute to what they felt was good or not good, what they wanted to see, what they didn't want to see. And so we got a bunch of rich feedback, kept modifying the drafts, and then rolled out with our final vision at the end of 2013. And so it's a 2024 vision. And in it, our goal is to have 1 to 3 new businesses by 2024. So it's continued slow, deliberate growth, but businesses that are synergistic with each other. We're also a unique model. All the businesses share a lot of resources. There's a lot of interbusiness between them. Like our creamery sells baked goods and ice cream to the 2 markets and to our catering company. And so we wanted to make sure that the businesses continue to have that interconnectivity that makes us, I think, so dynamic and creates a much stronger foundation. But also wanted to stay here in San Francisco, in communities where we feel we can go deep. For us, it's really not about it's not about the volume of what we do. It's about the impact that we have, and continuing to get closer to achieving our mission of creating community and seeing social change happen. So, that's the plan. I mean, we're starting, rumblings of like what maybe the third store might be. So, I think next year, 2017, it'll be part of our, determining that next step will be part of our strategic plan.
So to the point of community, Sarah, I know we've talked a lot about the cooking classes at 18 Reasons, but I'd also love for you to talk a little bit about the Feed Your People events and community dinners, because I think that I at least found that to be a really interesting thing that I didn't know about 18 Reasons.
Yeah, another kind of unique thing that we do that a lot of cooking schools don't do is we open our doors for dinners a couple times a month. So on the last Wednesday of the month, we do a $10 dinner called Community Dinner. We do 2 seatings of 40 people, and 18 Reasons is about half the size of this room. So you can imagine 40 people coming on in, squeezing together, eating 1 plate of food that could be anything. This month, 2 of our volunteers are actually cooking the dinner. They're a brother and sister who grew up in Martinique, and they're doing a kind of French Caribbean community dinner. Last month, we had a fish fry. Our jam and preserving teacher who grew up in Harlem, having fried fish every Friday night, wanted to do a fish fry. So we made fried fish sandwiches with the heroic butcher from Bi-Rite helping us out with the fish and frying fish for 40 people in a pan about this big. And next month, actually Bi-Rite is going to work with us to do some of their dinner deli specials for the community dinner. In October, we usually do an Oktoberfest sausage and sauerkraut business where I make sauerkraut. I love fermenting and preserving, and our chef cooks the sausages. And it's really just whatever pops into our mind that month that seems like it would be fun to do and that people would enjoy. It's totally different, and we do 2 seatings of 40, so we have 80 people coming through. We have a lot of regulars. The first seating, a lot of people bring their kids. The second seating, a lot of people bring bottles of wine, and people just hang out and meet their neighbors, have a great time. And through our community dinners, we met a cookbook author named Leslie Jonath who wanted to put together together a book of big batch recipes. So how to cook for a crowd or with a crowd. And this book is called Feed Your People. It's coming out next year, and it's a collaboration between 18 Reasons and Leslie and a bunch of chefs from all over the country. So she asked restaurant chefs and home cooks and kind of people she found out about who were famous in their community for having big gatherings, and got recipes of, not something they would make in their restaurant, but what would you cook if you had 20 people coming over to your house? And so it's got everything from like seafood boils to tamale making parties to slab pie. This is my favorite recipe that I learned this year. Take a giant cookie sheet, dough, fruit, dough, bake it like a giant Pop-Tart. So good. Oh my God. So that's going in the book. And we started doing some dinners with some chefs who'd been contributing to the book. So our next door neighbors, Namugaji, has anyone been there? Korean, Japanese place on the corner. So we did a bosam, big like traditional dinner with pork belly and oysters and all these things with them. Pablo Johnson, who's a New Orleans advocate for kind of New Orleans food culture, is coming with his Rice and Beans Roadshow next Monday. Rice and beans traditionally eaten on Mondays in New Orleans while people are doing their laundry, cooking something easy. And he's coming. We're going to do 40 people, rice and beans. It's kind of a Feed Your People event. So, we're always trying to bring people in to 18 Reasons. We want people to cook, but it's kind of a little secret part of 18 Reasons. If you don't like to cook, there's still stuff for you. You can come and experience home cooking that other people have cooked for you. So yeah, our Feed Your People dinners and our monthly community dinner are a great way to come and check us out.
And to meet your neighbors.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I love about it.
It's 8 people at a table, so you're definitely going to meet people.
That's cool.
So Sam, you mentioned that after kind of evaluating your long-term plan, you had the interest to kind of focus your efforts in the Bay Area, but a lot of the issues that you guys described about people not knowing how to eat sustainably or not knowing how to cook is a pretty big issue nationally, internationally, and I think that what you've done is actually a great model for expanding this kind of education and like kind of countering these issues elsewhere. So aside from not having a physical presence there, is there any kind of alternative thing that you guys have been thinking about where you can expand your influence in other parts of the U.S. to maybe bring, your lessons and your expertise to solve these problems elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done a lot in that arena. I saw several people buying the book. Eat Good Food. I mean, that was written with specifically that intent to be that empowering, that teaching tool to give people the basics that they needed to know while they were shopping in the grocery store or wherever they were getting their food, right? And it really, for me, it distills down to the 5 key questions that I think anybody who's going to eat and who's in a position of buying food should be asking. Where is that food coming from? How was it grown? Who grew it? Right? Where it was grown and how it tastes. And it's really incredible if you walk into any traditional supermarket and ask one of those questions to whoever's working in the produce department, they won't know the answer. I mean, the answer that really depresses me that they can't answer is how it tastes. I mean, the people working in those stores themselves couldn't tell you which of the apples was the best tasting apples because they haven't really taken the time, and it's not really of value to them, right, in that company. And so I think the book is, it's like sold over 30,000 copies, and is, some schools have bought it, and that's one thing that I think has been a huge help, and I know several grocery stores use it as well to train and teach their staff. I speak and I talk at conferences fairly regularly, trying to influence other retailers. I belong to a few retailer organizations where, and we're really transparent and open about everything that we do. We share our business practices, we share our staff manual, we share our training material, because I want other independents to succeed. I mean, it's really important for me to see community-based markets, community-based organizations of all kinds really thrive because they become really amazing identifiers for the people that live there. Bi-Rite's a really great example of kind of a transformation of a community. When we, even though the market was in my family for since 1964, it went out of our family from 1989 to 1997, and the neighborhood really went through a pretty crappy period of time. Dolores Park was taken over by a couple of gangs, and my dad would never let me go play there when I was a kid because it was pretty rough. By the time that we got the store back in 1997, because it was out of our family, there was metal grates on the windows, and all the storefronts on 18th Street had metal grates on their windows because break-ins were pretty normal. And there were less than, with all those commercial storefronts, there was probably like 25, 30 people employed on that block. And after we opened, Delfina opened a few months later, Tartine opened, Namagaji, Izakaya Izuki. I mean, there's like a lot of new businesses, and there's like over 400 people now working on that block in one single block. I mean, to me, and that block has kind of become a real example of a community, like a community hub in a lot of ways around the country. And it's really identified by a lot of developers as like a model for what they envision, in transforming, communities. And so we've been this influence, I guess, and this inspiration for I guess community development, but also for just other retailers and other businesses that are just not looking at business as a means of bringing a bottom line, right? But as a means of building relationships and creating a stronger fabric in the community, a tighter fabric.
You also invented salted caramel ice cream.
Yeah, we did. We did.
Huge influence.
And that, we were actually just talking about this yesterday. And sometimes our generosity and sharing has bitten us. There was a woman who was planning on opening up an ice cream shop in Seattle who wanted to spend a couple of days with us, and we let her, because when we went to open up the creamery, nobody that owned an ice cream store would actually let us spend any time with them to learn how to use the Emery Thompson, this machine, the dispatch freezer that makes the ice cream. And my wife Ann, who developed the recipes and as our head pastry chef, during her time as a pastry chef in restaurants, would use like one of those old school white mountains, like the wooden bucket with the ice and the salt, and the motor that would crank, and then you'd know that the ice cream was almost done when the motor was struggling because the ice cream was thick. And so we had no idea how to use these larger batch freezers, and so we made a commitment saying, everyone was shut us out, but we're not going to shut people out, and so. She came and spent a couple days with us and opened up her shop, and she had salted caramel, honey lavender, balsamic strawberry, roasted banana, but the kicker was she had Sam's sundae on the menu as well.
So I just want to ask one last question as we wrap up, and I also want to thank, first of all, Paige, who is hiding in the audience. Paige is our farmers market specialist, and she arranged all of this, and she is awesome if you get a chance to talk to her. But as we sort of, as you mentioned, this is a room full of the choir. And so I just want to ask you, what can the people here who are already engaged home cooks do to help the people around them become more engaged in community of food and home cooking and self-empowerment and all of the wonderful things that you guys taled about today?
Invite your friends over for dinner. I know in cities, and I think this is more true in New York, like people don't go out because their houses are too small, right? People don't cook at home, their houses are too small, everyone's going out. And in San Francisco, people go out a lot. There's a lot of wonderful restaurants, and it's fun to meet friends out, but it's also really fun to cook together at home. In most cases, it's healthier. In most cases, it'll save you money. In most cases, you'll have more fun too. I used to live in Paris, and in Paris, you go out to dinner at 8 and you leave the restaurant at midnight, and that was your plan for the night. That's it. Here, you go to a restaurant at 8 and you're back on the street at 9, which means you have to go spend more money at a bar or something if you want to keep hanging out, right? When I moved back here, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what are we doing? What do we do next? It's only 9. But if you're at home, there's no time limit. No one's going to turn your table. You can hang out as long as you want. And you can actually linger and enjoy your meal and hang out with your friends as long as you want to.
And drink as much wine as you want to.
Drink as much wine as you want to. And it's half the price.
Yeah, I agree. I think cooking more is a great way to inspire others to cook. Feeding people is such a wonderful thing. I also think coming to 18 Reasons, we rely on a network of 900 volunteers to do the work that we do. The cooking, the free programming, and we're teaching like 2,500 students a year, and it takes and we only have a paid staff of 10, and several of those are AmeriCorps volunteers. It takes a village to make this work happen, and it's happening in the 5 Bay Area counties. and so we always need support and both in time and in financial. It'd be a huge thing to help with, and attending classes at 18 Reasons as well, I feel is so important, because you're actually getting to know the people that live in the community that you live and work in, and that to me is what makes our society stronger. The more people that we get to know, the more diverse the population of people that we interact with, the more empathetic and I think the more empowered that we are with our view of what a strong, tight, successful community looks like.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's awesome, and it was
Thanks.
an honor. And thank you all for sticking around. And now there will be ice cream. So.